in one of my smartest moves ever made, or dumbest moves ever made, depending on who you ask. I threw it all away to jump on an airplane to Japan, a country that I'd never been to before, but I'd only like briefly dabbled in the language and just, liked the entertainment, popular culture. And I joined the JET program. So I moved to Japan thinking that I would just stay there for a year. And then I ended up coming back like 8 years later. So,
Wow.
yeah.
And that actually was going to be my next question, because I did know that you attended the JET program. And
Yep.
this part I might edit out because it's a spoiler for upcoming videos. But
Okay.
hopefully by February, I'll be starting the JET program over in Osaka.
Oh, no way. Oh, I was in Osaka. Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
I saw on Wikipedia, actually.
I mean, the JET program I cannot say enough how much it changed my life completely. I would have nothing that I have now if it wasn't for the JET program. But the JET program also, for all it is, it's nothing more than a door and an opportunity, and it does nothing for you. Like, I know so many people that went on the JET program and came home. They stayed there for a year and it was fun, and they came home. That's it. They were done. Other people like me, it completely and utterly, fundamentally altered their lives and took them to a whole different place. So, yeah.
That's amazing. I'm looking forward to it. Our departure time has been delayed multiple times, so because of Corona.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and I'm sure you'll still get to go.
For those of you that don't know me, which might actually be quite a few of you because I never formally introduced myself, I'm Duncan, aka Morlock, and I've been hosting this channel for years now. Longer than I would actually care to admit for the minimal amount of success that I've had. And a while back when I was in college, I had a pretty crazy idea. I wanted to live and work in Japan. Now, there are actually many ways to make this happen, but one of the most popular and straightforward ways is through the JET program. The Japan Exchange and Teaching Program was something I had heard about while studying Japanese in college, and I figured I would at least give my application a shot. At the time, all I had to lose was time, and maybe some of my dignity when I would inevitably be rejected. JET's primary goal is to place English speakers into Japanese schools as assistant teachers. This helps kids learn authentic English, promotes international relations, and blah blah blah. Look, I'm not here to pitch JET to you guys. There's plenty of information and thousands of other videos that already do that. Instead, I just want to relay my experience with JET, because it might be a little bit different than some of the other stories you've seen. You see, when I applied, I was majoring in computer science, which was a far cry from anything education-focused. But I did have a decent amount of experience working at a local school's recreation department. Still, a big part of my decision was that I didn't really have a direction that I wanted to go in after I completed college. At the very least, JET would give me something to do for a couple years. So I went in with full expectation that my application would be passed over like so many others before mine. And to my surprise, I got in.
This might be the first time that I've shown my face on the channel, so now you know. This is how bad it really is. In the next 100 days, I might start living in Japan. And that's a little weird to say out loud.
By the time I got my acceptance letter, I was already putting my degree to work at an electronic record-keeping company. It's just as exciting as it sounds. I was fully prepared to quit and pack up my things at a moment's notice, but the actual process of moving from Boston to Japan is not immediate. There was a lot of paperwork for visas and insurance and other stuff like that needed to be filled out. But slowly everything was getting set in place for a September 2020 departure.
I am feeling a little nervous, but right now we are what feels like nearing the end of a global pandemic.
But September 2020 would come and go without a single Boston jet entering into Japan. In fact, by and large, most jets wouldn't enter into Japan that year at all. The world would be turned on its head by what is still at the time of recording an ongoing pandemic, and Japan would close off its borders to any and all outsiders. This would be the start of one of the longest and most frustrating years of my life. Now, circumstances were clearly out of my control, out of Jet's control, out of literally anyone's control at the moment. At the time, there was no telling when we would have a vaccine, let alone when Japan would actually start letting people enter into the country again. And it became all too quickly apparent that September's departure was not going to happen.
So last time that I talked about about going to Japan, it was looking like I would still be going in September. Right now it is December. Let's give a rough timeline of where we're at here, okay? I'm supposed to be going to Japan, but that hasn't happened yet. Why is that? Because there is still a pandemic. Originally, we're supposed to go in September. That didn't happen. We were given the choice to defer to 2021 or to stick it out and maybe go earlier. I chose to stick it out. I don't know whether that was a bad decision in hindsight, but it certainly was a decision. And for a while, there wasn't anything. There was a rough date of sometime in January, and then that changed to January 6th, and then that changed to sometime after January 6th, and then that changed to January, maybe February. Until finally, just yesterday, they announced that Boston would be leaving January 30th. And just today, Japan announced that they were closing the borders between it and every other country. I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I can wait as long as it takes, basically. There is no immediate rush to get me out of the place that I'm living at. You know, my parents' basement. And there's no danger of me losing either of the two jobs that I've been working. Other people have not been so lucky. There's been a ton of stories online and in groups that I've been in that have just been people pouring their hearts out because they don't know if they're going to be able to literally live in a house for the next week.
There were a lot of people in worse situations than mine. People that had quit their jobs preparing for the first departure date. People that were suffering through terrible bosses and coworkers. Because at the time, that's all they had to hang on to. And I can't help but feel like this situation could have been at least mitigated if Jet had officially delayed the intake for an entire year from the very start. Of course, idiots like me have to accept some of the blame. We did willingly put our names onto a list that said departure as soon as possible. But early on, those dates seemed much more of a possibility than they ever actually were a reality.
Last time that I recorded something, I said that there was a lockdown until the end of January for Japan. It is now February 5th. It is now the start of February, and we've officially received word that we'll be coming either April or September. This is after my mom threw a going away party for me, in which a lot of wonderful people got together on Zoom and gave me presents, because it was also like a belated birthday thing. Point being is that I feel a little bit guilty not being where I thought I would be. I know how ridiculous that sounds, and I know, like, oh yeah, whatever, it's out of your control, but it still sucks. And it sucks that now I'm going to be telling people, oh, maybe September. Because what I've decided to do is just tell people September. That way, if I end up going in April, it'll be a surprise, and I'll be out of here. But if it does actually end up being September, it's no big deal. I'll be going to the Japanese consulate in Boston to pick up my passport and visa, which is something that I shouldn't be doing unless I was getting on the plane to go to Japan. But I am doing it, which means that I'm not going to be leaving for quite some time, unfortunately. I really do feel like I am the furthest away from going to Japan than I ever have been on this journey.
It was around this time that I probably hit my lowest point, which I know we're pretty early into this video, all things considered, so maybe that's not that impressive. I was stuck waiting for a job that seemed like it was never going to come, while I worked away at a company that I was beginning to think I would never leave. It was rough, but I wasn't the only one in limbo. What might have been the greatest boon to my mental health was the Jet Prep Discord. This Discord was originally set up for 2020 jets to prepare for departure, and it quickly became a place for 2020 and 2021 jets to share news and rumors with each other. This community was welcoming, friendly, and generally a good place to be most of the time. We also got to a point where we all worshipped a drawing of a sheep and literally prayed in the chat for it to bless us with departure dates. Okay, we went a little nuts. Then, in stark contrast, we had the Jet Reddit. This place is a cesspool. Okay, a lot of the people in the Discord came from the Reddit, but the actual Jet program Reddit itself became increasingly full of rumors, gossip, and just general doom posting. On one hand, this Reddit would quickly disseminate any information we got from around the world. If one group of jets got news, all the incoming jets would have that same news within minutes, sometimes with the contents of the email just copied and pasted into the post. But the atmosphere was generally more jaded and bitter for a while in that subreddit. But maybe that's just a Reddit problem as a whole. In any case, it would finally start to lighten up as we got departure information teased out bit by bit.
So things for the JET program have picked up a little bit now. As you think they should, we're almost a year after our initial departure date. Great. So a while back, we heard that there were going to be 5 potential departure dates for everyone. These ranged from September to December, with a spattering of October, and I think November wasn't actually an option for some reason. So there were 5 departure dates. Or there are 5 departure dates, maybe. Things are still kind of nebulous right now, as frustrating as that might be, but at least it's looking like it's moving forward. Vaccinations in Japan have been rolling out steadily from what I've heard. The Olympics are about to happen.
The Olympics was actually the worst thing that could have happened. It spawned numerous stories of foreigners not following COVID procedures. Not only that, but cases skyrocketed in Tokyo. There was a point where I literally watched results daily, just waiting for things to level off. But it seemed to rise almost infinitely, and I began to fear that it would mean another delay. So at that point, I had made a promise with myself. If our next departure date was delayed again, no matter how long, I would drop out. I would move on with my life and find a different way to eventually visit Japan. I had put it all on the line for this last departure date.
Once again, it's been a minute since I recorded anything for this video, and there's been a few updates that I think have happened since the last time that I recorded something. See, the problem is, I literally have no idea what I talked about last time, or even when that was. I could go back to the footage and see what it is that I talked about, or I could just record off the cuff like this. Regardless, things are moving forward. Boston has a departure date, which is now September 25th. And right now we are recording on August 31st. I've put a lot of faith in this date, and that's for a few reasons. Despite the fact that COVID numbers have been steadily rising in Japan since the Olympics, we're just starting to see those numbers level off, and I do think that they're going to be down to a manageable number by the time it comes for our departure. I've put so much faith in this departure date that today was my last day of my
real job. I am now no longer a computer programmer / analyst, and I guess I'm just a English teacher in waiting. There's also some other reasons to put more faith in this date than the ones before. For starters, all Jets had to sign a pledge saying that they would abide by COVID restrictions and wouldn't bring COVID into the country, basically. Basically, by signing this paper, I'm saying that I pretty promised to be on my best behavior while they quarantined me for 2 weeks. And honestly, I have no problem with that. I would rather go into Japan and be absolutely sure that I wasn't bringing in COVID, just as I'm sure the government wants to be absolutely sure that I'm not bringing in COVID. To me, this is no big deal. Also, this is not the actual pledge that I signed. I messed up on this copy, so I printed out a second one. Anyways, there's still some other reasons that have me more confident. Even though last time we were delayed right after I had submitted my visa, we're still further along in the departure process than at least Boston ever was before. A few weeks ago, we had a whole day-long orientation setting going over living in Japan and various teaching exercises. And I know that some groups before were this far along before getting delayed. I think it's only reasonable now to have a small part of me that still doesn't feel like I'm ever going to be in Japan. It's been a rough year. It's been a rough couple of years. And now that things are finally settling in, I do think that this is going to be it. But if it isn't, and there's another delay, at that point, what I've been telling myself is that I'll drop out of the program. I don't actually know if when the time comes that I'll be able to do that, but that's what I've been saying, and I do think that it's more than fair. But hey, when we leave in September, I won't have to worry about that. Of course, there are a lot of things that I have left to do back at home, a lot of people to say goodbye to, a lot of things to wrap up. I've fallen way behind on my YouTube videos as of late. The last thing that I uploaded was the Sogo Ishii video, which I think turned out really well and people really liked. And it hasn't so much been a case of declining views so much as it is declining motivation with all of this going on. I'm hoping now that I've quit one job that I'll be able to put a good amount of effort and focus in on J-Horror Month and put out a slew of just great videos for October. If you're watching this, then you might already know that I put out 4 videos in October, which, for the most part, I'm pretty proud of. But what you might not have known is that by the time those videos were finished and uploaded, I had been in Japan for a week. So at this point, I can finally say, yes, I did make it to Japan, and yes, I currently am in Japan now. But it wasn't easy. The country imposed very strict regulations on foreigners entering into it. Naturally, one of these was a negative PCR test result, and this was by far the thing that made me the most anxious. The test could only be done in a small window of time, 72 hours before the flight left, and it had to be a very specific type of PCR test. Getting the wrong one meant that you would have to get retested on the spot at the airport, and potentially, if there was a long line or something, that could cause someone to miss their flight entirely. If I got positive, even a false positive, would mean that I wouldn't be able to leave on the 25th. And if I didn't leave on the 25th, I don't actually know what would have happened. The information we got amounted to, please try and not get COVID, okay? Which is easier said than done. We had no information on what would happen if we tested positive other than that we would be sent at a later date. And to be honest, at the time of writing this, I still don't know if people who did test positive just before their departure date have even left yet. But unfortunately, there were actually a few people that had this happen to them. So, while anticipating the test was excruciating, I knew that once I had it in my hands, there would be literally nothing else stopping me from getting on that plane. And sure enough, the departure from Logan Airport was a relative breeze. I got to meet plenty of other Jets, many of whom I had already talked to online before. The terminal was completely empty. Literally the only other people there were Jets leaving that day and maybe 1 or 2 Japanese people returning home. Before I knew it, boarding had started, and I very quickly found myself on a direct flight to Japan. This was the start of what would be a pretty long and somewhat agonizing 13-hour direct flight to Tokyo. During this flight, I watched 2 feature-length movies, plus 3 wrestling matches. At any given time, it felt like the flight was either 5 minutes or 50 hours. It was a strange sort of time dilation that I've only experienced once before when watching the film Inspector Gadget starring Matthew Broderick. I would try to sleep intermittently between my detective movie about a train and my sappy teen drama about a serial killer. But I don't think I ever actually fully went to sleep on that flight. During the entire ordeal, the most positive experience that I had was probably the food. This was actually a really good meal, especially for airplane food. Plus the ice cream flavor that they gave out was Americone Dream, which I couldn't tell if it was an intentional choice or just random chance. Little did I know that this would be the best meal I would eat for 2 weeks. We were all pretty exhausted by the time we touched down in Tokyo. Still, our journey was far from over. The airport had been haphazardly redesigned, with arrows leading us from one room to the next and back again. We entered into a labyrinth of quarantine precautions, and there was no time to snap pictures of any of this. There were also plenty of signs saying not to take any pictures, so you'll just have to take my word for it, because we were basically herded from one end of the airport back to the other and then back again, all while carrying a bunch of papers that, if we lost at any chance, meant that we could be in huge trouble. Of course, we had to show our negative PCR test, our good boy pledge, and got our temperature checked at nearly every station. The only time that we had to catch our breath was at the PCR testing room. That's right, after getting our test in America and handing them the results, we had to get another one in Japan. And this time it was a spit test. My mouth was so dry from this 13-hour flight that I didn't think I was going to be able to spit into this tube enough for them to test any of it. To activate my saliva glands, there was a picture of a freshly cut orange and lemon with the caption, "Think of this." It did not help in the slightest. But somehow I managed to pull through this test and all the other quarantine measures that they had put in place. Even after all that, we still had to contend with regular customs, baggage claim, and all the other fun activities available at Narita Airport. We would eventually run out of residency paperwork to sign and would soon find ourselves on a bus. Although the bus ride was only a half hour, I distinctly remember this being the first time I got some actual sleep since I had left America. By the time we pulled into the hotel, everyone was ready to collapse on their feet. But we had to power through the hotel's sign-in process, along with a small meeting laying out the ground rules for the hotel and some of our orientation materials. Of course, with the amount of things we were being told and papers we were being handed, it was incredibly hard to keep track of any of this, especially with very, very little sleep. But eventually, I did finally make it to my hotel room, where I proceeded to fall asleep almost immediately. The hard part was over. Now all I had to do was wait.
After many setbacks and delays, the Boston group is finally quarantining in Japan. And right now we are about halfway through the first week of quarantine. We'll be out on October 11th, at which point I'll be in Osaka. We've been given a phone to track our daily health requirements on my SOS. We also do daily temperature checks and all that jazz. Quarantining has been as good as it kind of can be, because it is 2 weeks trapped in a hotel room that I can't leave. But we're making the most of it. There's a bunch of orientation stuff that I've been doing, and it really isn't too intensive. In fact, I could just not do them and fill out the survey that says that I did them, but I'm not gonna do that. I might as well get as much knowledge as I can before actually going to teach. Our times at the convenience store are pretty limited. When and where and why we can leave our rooms are also pretty limited, so we're kind of just stuck here. The hotel room is a decent size. For one person, it's fine. I have 2 beds for God knows why, but I've been watching a lot of Japanese television. There's a Jake Paul episode of Kamen Rider Revice on right now. Have I picked up any Japanese? No, not yet. I have no clue what anyone's saying at any given time. A little bit early to say whether this was a mistake or not. There's definitely certain stressors, certain things that maybe aren't the best, but that's to be expected with such a big change, and also coming in during COVID, during quarantine, and everything. But the state of emergency in Japan is ending today, and I'll be out in a week, and we'll just see where things go from there.
The 2-week quarantine would prove to be a pretty relaxing time, actually. Aside from the occasional Zoom meeting and daily temperature checks, we were mostly left to ourselves. We took PCR tests each week, bringing my total up to 4 PCR tests in just little over 2 weeks, which I think is a tad excessive. But quarantine did help me adjust to jet lag, and it gave me some time to talk with my family and friends over Discord. If anything, it made me realize that as long as I had internet and food, I could live relatively happy. But of course, even that had its own problems. Internet, especially during the daytime, could slow to a crawl because of the amount of people online filling out orientation materials and going onto Zoom. At certain points in the day, it was actually faster and more stable to use a VPN. Food also presented its own problems. In order to feed hundreds of jets staying at the hotel, we were given small bentos. Now, a bento lunch in general is not bad. Hell, I'm still surviving off bentos for the most part. But these ranged from okay to pretty terrible.
So, we have our boxed lunch in a literal box, and let's open this up. Oh boy, it's chicken nuggets. I honestly don't know. I don't know anymore. This is actually pretty similar to what we had for breakfast. See here, we just had like a huge hunk of bread stuck in the middle of there for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. It comes with one of these select fresh fruit things. Most of the time, they've been green tea flavored. I don't know. Cherry and pineapple? Is that what this is? Cherry and pineapple? And of course, for our main course here, we have a couple hunks of chicken and some rather sad-looking fries. We've got these big things of chicken and some fries. Anyways, this isn't a food channel, so I'm not gonna have you guys watch me eat. I just want to share my food experience. The actual room service itself has been much better. I have some coffee over there. But the quality of the free food that we get here is naturally very, not the best.
Most, if not all, meals were served wet and soggy. And generally, meals were not a good time all around. We had the option to order room service, or buy snacks from a little convenience store mock-up that they had on the top floor. But all of that was on our own dime. Still, we were in Tokyo, and we were safe, for the most part.
In other news, a powerful earthquake measuring 5.9 in magnitude struck the Tokyo region on Thursday evening local time. It caused buildings to sway, but no serious injuries have been reported thus far.
They also described Thursday's quake as the strongest to hit the capital region since 2011.
All right, quarantine update, guys. Not even like 20 minutes ago, we just got what was my very first earthquake. That's a 6.1, 6.1 magnitude earthquake. And it just happened in Tokyo while we were quarantining. Crazy. The room was shaking. And I was in my underwear for the entire thing. I threw on a shirt just to, look presentable for this. But that was really an experience. I'm surprised that I wasn't more scared by it. I was just kind of like, oh, this is happening, and went over to the bathroom and stood in the door frame, which I now am aware is not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go underneath an object and try to duck for cover that way. I guess there's always next time. Good thing this wasn't really bad. There's been these like really loud announcements blaring over, like they've burst out the speakers, updating us about the situation. Right now, the elevators are out of order, so we're just trapped here. Yeah, real exciting way to enter into Japan. Quarantine is almost over, so this is really kind of a great capstone to put on it. Anyways, I realize I'm kind of tempting fate here by recording this right now, because aftershock could just happen at any moment. And that would be great to capture on camera. But it might be really bad to happen to me in real life.
While the earthquake gave us all a good scare, it was oddly reassuring to me. Until I came to Japan, I hadn't experienced an earthquake at all, and frankly, I was terrified. But after only 2 weeks, I had experienced an earthquake, and a pretty big one at that. So now, with a little bit more confidence, I began to pack my bags, ready to leave for Osaka the next day.
Alright, this is going to be my last update from the hotel. I'm packing away all my stuff right now, so that means that the microphone that I'm recording this on is actually going to be going into one of my 2 suitcases. And I think I just kicked the table, but we're going to ignore that. I just came back from my government-allocated 15 minutes of social time, which was fun, but it was also 15 minutes of meeting other jets up at the top floor, and then immediately going back down. Staying at the hotel has been an adventure. Not a very interesting one, but certainly an adventure. From the terrible food to the earthquake that woke me up in the middle of the night, there's certainly been a lot going on around here. So this will be the last chance that I get to talk to you guys from the hotel. I'm heading towards Osaka by Shinkansen, and basically I'm shipping out all of my luggage, except for a few things beforehand. And then I'm heading over there myself. I guess it's going to be more real now than it ever has been before. Found out I'm going to be teaching in elementary school, so that's something. The stuff that has gotten me through this quarantine has absolutely been the line chats and Discord group calls that the Boston Jets have had. Mainly because I think I would go insane if I wasn't talking to other people. Goodbye, hotel. And goodbye, not so scenic view outside.
The next morning, I got up. I got on a bus, then a train, then a car, and then I was in Mino. My journey, for all intents and purposes, was complete. So, now what? Other than some small videos that I took at Town Hall, I mostly stopped recording anything once I got to Mino. There was a lot of paperwork I had to sign, and I still had to finish up some work on the Slitmouth Woman video, so I was pretty busy. For the first week, I didn't have cell data, and for the first 2 weeks, I didn't have internet, so I was pretty much roughing it for somebody that spends an obsessive amount of time online. Overall, it was kind of a rough transition, buying all the appliances I would need and just setting up my daily life in Japan. But once I was more or less acclimated, the thing that stuck out to me wasn't how different things were. Instead, it was how similar some things were. A lot of times I would notice a little thing on the street, something like a barbershop swirl, and think, oh, they have that too. Because once you get past your I'm in Japan feeling and experience some of the neat little oddities that are different, you start to find just a lot of things that are the same. I've kept telling people that moving to Japan has been a surprisingly lateral move in my life. It's a place, like a lot of other places, and every day I'll discover something new that I love about it, and something else that I really don't. When I set out to move to Japan, I didn't have anything else in mind but the move itself. The application, the delays, the quarantine, that was all just part of the journey. And part of me felt like getting to Osaka was basically the end of that journey. But if anything, it was the opposite. In a lot of ways, I'm back where I started. When I first applied for JET, I was basically on my own and maybe just a little directionless. But even just the experience leading up to and including my departure has prepared me for a wealth of new experiences, not just here, but I would say, hopefully, in life in general. After all, being screwed over for about 1.5 years will do that to you. So the question is, where do we go from here? The net is vast and infinite. First and foremost, I want to use my location to the best of its abilities. This channel is going to cover even more niche things than you could have even possibly imagined. If you thought we were digging deep before, we're going to hit new levels. We're going to go into things that no one has even cared or thought about for years. Anyways, if you're at the end of this, thanks for watching. I know this is a bit of a self-indulgent video, but hopefully you got something out of it more than just me saying I'm in Japan over and over again. And if you didn't, I guess I'll just try better next time.